the Peace Begins at Home Summit. And I think for Indigenous people, we haven't had too much peace at home for many, many generations. So as I was introduced, I am the executive director of the Native Women's Shelter, and I was originally born in Thompson, Manitoba. But my community is Lac-La-Ronge, Saskatchewan, Treaty 6, and I am Cree. I am of the Cree Nation. So my mother went to residential school, and for those who are unaware of what residential school is, it is a school where the government and the churches forced Indigenous families to go there. If your parents did not allow you to go, they would put you in jail. And this has gone on for over 100 years. The last residential school closed in 1996. So my mother went to residential school, and her experience was devastating. And there's lots of effects of residential school. At the Native Women's Shelter, we have many people that come in that are themselves survivors or intergenerationally impacted, like myself. So my experience was that I did not go to residential school. However, the government, when they started to close the residential schools, they wanted to create another type of assimilation process. And instead of the schools, what they did was they had the social workers get involved and go across Canada and take young children and put them into the foster care system. So this was born out of Saskatchewan. It was called the AIM program, Adopt an Indian or Métis program. And sometimes the social workers would go into people's houses, do a visit, take a picture of the children, and it would end up in newspapers. And then they would apprehend the children. So when I was living at the time, I was in Thompson, Manitoba. The Jewish family that ended up adopting me was living in Montreal. And this is actually the Montreal newspaper where they were also involved in the AIM program. For whatever reason, in Montreal, the Jewish Family Services also was involved with the AIM program. And what was interesting was before they got involved with the AIM program, they were just, there were children that were of, all nationalities. When the AIM program started, it was just Indigenous children. So my parents had gone there, my adopted family had gone there, adopted my brother Neil, who was white. And then when they wanted another child, because they didn't think they could have kids, they went back. The only children they were offering at that time were Native children. And a lot of the times, the reason for the social workers to take the children was because the parents were unfit, neglectful, or had addictions. And my biological mother did have that issue. She was neglectful. But there are many families that were able to take care of their children, but the government really didn't want to look into that. They really wanted to take the children. And there was also financial incentives. So if a social worker found a family in the United States, they could get anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 per child. And they also believed that children would just be better off in a white middle-class home. And also if children had poverty. So there's an enormous amount of poverty in certain communities, like at Awapiskat, where they don't have clean water, that would be a reason to take away the children. But that is also the government's fault because they did not install the proper ways to have clean water. And this is still an ongoing issue today in that community. This is the picture that my parents, I was in a catalog, and this is the picture that they chose. So this is me standing outside the foster home with my sister, who is next to me, but she was considered too old for adoption. And my parents were like, send her over. So I was taken from Thompson on a plane and brought to Montreal. And this is a picture of me with my blonde brother and blonde sister. And it's pretty obvious that I am adopted, but it was something that you do not talk about, right? And the family that adopted me really sort of bought into the whole idea that, my background needed to be erased and that I should not tell anyone I was Indigenous. And it was a very, very difficult upbringing. It was not a happy home. However, I had a wonderful grandmother that in Yiddish we call her Bubby, and she used to look at me and had stars in her eyes and thought I would do great things one day. So she was really that person that offered me like all the love and all the confidence. And this is a picture of her in a wheelbarrow and she was pregnant back in the day. And there's another picture of her with my grandfather when she was older. And this is my biological family. So my bubby, if I go back to my bubby, we were super close after I moved out and I was on my own and I was still going to her for guidance. She developed cancer and she knew she was going to pass away. And she was like, you need to reconnect with your family and I will help you find your family. And she did. And then that's how I was able to get my Indian status and go back to school. But she was the one. So it was her sort of dying wish to send me back to my family. And this is my family. So I was able to meet my mom and my sister and my nieces and nephews. And that really sort of helped me with my sort of direction and how I was going to move in my life. So having my Indian status, I was able to go back uh, to university and get a degree. And I also was started working at the Native Women's Shelter in 1999, and I'm still there. So I started out as a volunteer, and then I became the executive director in 2004. And what's really Indigenous people, not only in Montreal, but across Canada. So for Canada, we have tried to bring different issues to light, sort of like the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Inquiry that took almost 4 years. There were 231 calls to justice that the government was supposed to implement. That was 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Only one has been accomplished. And then in Quebec, they had the Viens Commission. So that was also discrimination against Indigenous people, 142 recommendations. Maybe like a third, maybe a fourth have been accomplished. Truth and Reconciliation report in 2015. So it's almost the 10-year anniversary. I think it's I don't know, it's going to be in a couple of months that it's going to be the exact anniversary of 10 years. And there are 94 calls to action. And in 10 years, the government has only been able to complete 15, which is really, really difficult. And the number one TRC is the child welfare system, because even though the 60s Scoop ended, it didn't really end. There are more Indigenous children in care than there were by times a factor of 3 that went to residential school. There are so many kids in care. It's really, really discouraging. So as an Indigenous person working at the shelter, I need to create new programs to support families and support children. One of the programs that I started was called Mioscamin. So Mioscamin is a Cree word for the heart of innovation, groundbreaking, or breaking the mold. So at the Native Women's Shelter, you can stay there for, 3 to 6 months or 9 months, depending on each family. But where are they going to go after they finish the shelter? So what we wanted to do was build a second stage housing. So we did. So we can have up to 23 families living at Mioscamin. And what we also did was open a social pediatric center within the building that we call Saralikitak. So if you look at the sign, you can almost read it. So this is a transitional housing, so you can live there up to 3 to 5 years, and you have furnished, beautiful apartments. We provide everything. And we also have a program for either going back to school or back to a trade. So when you finish your time, you have the career of your choice. So at Mioscamin, we have wraparound services. We have a whole bunch of staff that are there 24/7. And we have workers like an intergenerational trauma worker. We don't have social workers. We call them empowerment workers. And then we also have a social pediatric center where we bring in other experts. So Serlikitak means butterfly in Inuktitut, and it's child-centered. So it's for any Indigenous family in Montreal. Anyone can come and get these services. And when it comes to youth protection, we also have hired our own lawyer because it's really hard to find a good lawyer. You may not be able to afford one, and also there's a lot of biases. So we hire our own lawyer. We have our own educator. We have a full team that is almost like warriors around the women and families. So when any time an issue comes up, we have them right at arm's length for them. Within Mioskimin and Serlikitak, we are able to close 2 youth protection files. That is huge. This is what we need to do. Because the government is not applying any of the recommendations, we are creating our own solutions because we can't wait. So another thing that is really difficult that stems from residential schools is the fact that there are mass graves. And when the TRC came out, it was discussed, it was shared, it's in, the literature. But in Kamloops, there was a discovery of 215 mass graves in May of 2021. A month later, there was in Saskatchewan 751 mass graves. And there was a huge outcry, and all the world was paying attention. But they're not really paying attention anymore. And the thing is that when the first 215 mass graves were announced, I did the first, oh, sorry, this is a picture of markers for the mass graves. So in 2021, I did the first Every Child Matters March, and we had maybe up to like 5,000 people that showed up. And I've been doing it every year. However, there's a time where you don't want to walk anymore. You actually want justice. And I have a friend and colleague named Alithia, who is an Inuk filmmaker. And she said, when do we get our own Nuremberg trial? When are people held accountable to these mass graves? Because we are just learning about it and it's not in the history books yet. So when do we get our own Nuremberg trial? So I ended up having a meeting with Amnesty International, and I asked them, what is the closest thing right now we can get to a Nuremberg trial? And they told me it is a permanent people's tribunal. And so I wrote to them, and they are based in Rome, and they will be coming to Montreal to have a permanent people's tribunal on missing Indigenous children and unmarked graves. May 25th, 2026. So many people don't know what a permanent people's tribunal in Canada is because they are based in Rome, but they have been around for 50 years. And although it's an international opinion, what they say could have huge implications. So what we ended up doing was, because I had actually spoken at the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Inquiry, I was testifying for 3 days. The lawyer who represented me, her name was Krista Bigcanoe, and I had reached out to her to ask her if she was interested. So she said yes. And what is even more beautiful was she said, I'll do it for free. So we have all these different people that have come together in a really beautiful way to help bring light to what has happened with the missing children and mass graves. And what's great about Krista is that she also found 5 additional Indigenous lawyers to look over the indictment. So we've worked with international human rights lawyers. One of them, Eric Sullivan, has actually done a PPT. There's been 3 in Canada, so he was involved in one of them. So he'll also be involved in this one as well. So he really knows what needs to be seen for this because we're doing crimes against humanity. And we also have an elders committee and a survivors committee. So for the last couple of years, I've been meeting with them regularly, and every time we have something important to talk about, we get guidance from them. And we have amazing people that are going to be showing up, and we also have like new partners. So now we're partnering with the David Suzuki Foundation. We are working with Future Generations Foundation, with No History, and we also have a website for more information. Um, so it's really important that we do this, and I think that when it becomes more public, it will be more public once the indictment is served to Canada. I think it's going to really bring inspiration to other Indigenous people that, you know, we have to keep fighting, and the truth needs to be seen, and this is one way that we can do it. In terms of my like work and my the reason why I'm here was really because of my grandmother, my Bubby. And I've been in this documentary called Becoming Naguset, and there was this writer, this children's writer that saw it and said, this could be a book. Your Bubby's love can be a book. So we wrote a book. And it's really, really beautifully done. We had an Indigenous illustrator named One Dove who made it just gorgeous. But this is a book about what happens during the 60 Scoop. I believe it is the only book on the 60 Scoop for children, and it's done in a really good way. And it really is an homage to my Bubby and also to my sister, because she was looking for me the whole time I was taken when I was 3. So I know that I don't have much time, and I hope I honored the time commitment. But for more information, please take a look at our website. We also have a website for the PPT called ourtruths.com. There's a little hyphen. And also, if anyone's interested in the book, these are the different places you can buy it. My co-author, Judith Henderson, is donating all the proceeds to the Native Women's Shelter. So that's really, really awesome. So, you know, everything that's happened to me, I've been able to have children of my own, and my children, have, love and peace at home. And it took a really long time, but when you have that sort of kernel of hope, it can change everything. So, just sort of a salute to the elders who help us and support us. Thank you so much for listening to me. I'm done.